Welcome all to the fascinating world of exercise physiology. Well, you're in for a treat because this semester Dr. Moffitt is not teaching the class. And I'm not sure if you've heard in the past, but Dr. Moffitt is not really a generous professor at all. But some other lady is teaching the class, so it'll be a much easier time for you all. But simply exercise physiology, all exercise physiology is, or physiology is how the body works, how the body does anything, whether it's move, breathe, whatever. In physiology is how, well, exercise means during exercise. So exercise physiology is how the body works during exercise. Mostly how the body, what the body's internally doing while you're exercising, before you exercise, after you exercise, how the body adapts to exercise, how it gets stronger, all that good stuff. So it's a very fascinating subject if you have any interest in exercise. So this is all the study is how the body exercises essentially. It takes certain chemicals, makes it into energy, and supplies that energy so you can actually use it for exercise. Now, in the very simplest sense, the body, just think of the body as a machine. In the very simplest sense, the body is a machine. Now, I know this is a very crude metaphor, but the body, in the simplest sense, is a machine. A machine, what does a machine do? It takes energy, whether that energy is a battery source, whether it's electricity, heat, whatever it is, and converts it to energy, and you can use it. And it converts it to a form that it can use to do whatever the machine does, whether it's move, whatever it does. Well, the body is the same thing. It takes energy in the form of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, whatever, food, whatever. So it takes that energy, it takes that macronutrients, the protein, the carbs, whatever, and it converts it through different chemical processes into energy, which is called ATP. And the body uses that ATP in order to do anything. Well, because you need ATP to do any type of muscle contraction and exercise, your muscles contract. So your body is simply a machine that it takes carbohydrates, proteins, whatever, and converts it to fuel in order to move or do anything that we do. So simplest sense, the body machine. Obviously, the body is not a machine in the simplest sense because it's more complicated. It can adapt and whatnot. But simplest sense, it's a machine. Just think of it as that way, and this will be much easier to understand. So the very first topic that we'll go over, or the very first introduction, the first test is on energy systems. This is what the whole first exam is on, is how the body, what we just talked about, how it takes carbohydrates, proteins, fats, whatever, and converts it to a form called ATP, which gives us energy to do either long endurance events or aerobic events or sprinting explosive events, such as jumping, throwing things, sprinting, very explosive. So it's how our body gets energy to do explosive activities. Or aerobic, which just means I don't want to say slow, but it's not as explosive. It's longer duration activities. Spelling wrong. So it's how our body takes these things. So there's different energy systems. Now, the very first question on the study guide, or the very first question on anything in exercise physiology, will be aerobic versus anaerobic, because that's like the most famous question people love asking. What's the difference between aerobic respiration versus anaerobic respiration, etc. Now, the simplest definition that everyone usually gives, or books usually give, is aerobic is with oxygen, anaerobic is without oxygen. Now, I really don't like that definition, and I believe your book, if you got the book, if you wasted money on the book, says that the definition of aerobic and anaerobic is no longer with and without oxygen, because that's a very poor definition. And other people call it with or without oxygen, but they're not technically correct. So we're not going to go with those definitions. Better definitions are aerobic means slow energy system, and anaerobic means fast. And this will make sense in a second. Now, anything you do in the body, any activity, whether it's running, sprinting, jumping, breathing, tapping your foot, walking upstairs, whatever, anything you do involves, you can classify into either aerobic or anaerobic. Anything you do, you can classify into these two things. So you have to know the definition of aerobic and anaerobic. So again, we'll say, let's just quickly go over fast glycolysis, just a very quick overview. Now, glycolysis is the main energy system in the body. It's the main thing that gives you energy in the body. So Glycolysis is taking a sugar or a carbohydrate. Sugar is the same thing as carbohydrates. It's taking sugar, what you eat from your diet, and going through many different processes and converting it to ATP, which ATP is a fancy word for energy. ATP is like the energy currency of the body. Just how you need money to do anything in the world nowadays, you need ATP in the body to do anything. Pretty much to do anything, you need ATP. So it's the same thing as money, energy, whatever you want to call it. So glycolysis is just taking the food that we eat from our diet, carbohydrates, sugars, and converting it through different processes to money or ATP or energy, whatever you want to call it. Similar thing is just think of a cool metaphor to relate this. I can't really think of a metaphor, but taking carbs converted to ATP. So you eat this is glycolysis. So now this carbohydrate, okay, so trying to think of an easy way to say this. Okay, so say you eat a carb, or carbs are always glucose. Glucose is another name for sugar, it's another name for carbohydrates. You'll find out in this class and in exercise physiology in general, many words mean the same thing. Glucose, sugar, same thing. So you eat this glucose from food, whatever it is. You just had a heavy food, pasta, bread, whatever. So your body goes through many chemical processes which you don't even know. They go over metabolism that breaks it down to glucose molecules. So now you have this glucose molecule, and glucose looks like this. Although this doesn't really matter because this is not metabolism, so you do not need no structures. But anyways, you have this glucose molecule. Now your body, glucose by itself is useless to the body. You can't really do anything with it. But your body can convert this glucose to an energy form that we can actually use for energy or money. So it can convert it to a meaningful form. So your body goes through many different processes, which we'll talk about. Well, we don't really have to talk about because it's more metabolism. And it converts it to another chemical called pyruvate. Now, pyruvate is not ATP. Pyruvate is a molecule that's closer to ATP, but it's not quite what we want, or it's not the final product. So glucose goes through many different processes and gets converted to pyruvate. And now pyruvate has two options. You can either form lactate, which everyone knows what lactic acid is. Lactic acid is it's always looked at as the negative side effect of exercise, and we'll go over some different things of why we form it and it's not that negative, or it can enter something called the Krebs cycle. Now right now I'm just throwing a bunch of terms at you and whatnot. You probably don't know what the hell pyruvate, Krebs cycle, lactic acid is, whatnot, but don't worry about it because in the next video we'll go into more detail about what each of these little things are, but this is a brief overview. You eat glucose, your body goes through different chemical processes, converts it to something called pyruvate. Pyruvate has two options, it's like a crossroad. It can either go to the Krebs cycle, or it can form lactic acid. And I'll think of a better metaphor in the next video to relate all this, but this is a simple definition. And Krebs cycle can go for many ATP molecules, but it takes longer. But this takes longer. Or it can form lactic acid, which is faster, and you form a few ATP. I actually have a really great metaphor for next video. So now if you remember that aerobic glycolysis means slow, long, or aerobic just means slow. Don't think of it as with oxygen, think of it as slow, the slow energy system. It gives you energy over a long period of time. So this is the aerobic system right here. Aerobic, remember anaerobic means fast. It gives you energy fast, extremely fast. So this will be the anaerobic system. So just think about this a little bit, and then the next video we'll go into more detail about these things, about what this picture means and whatnot. But anaerobic means fast. It gives you energy extremely fast. It's the body's energy system. Remember, the body's a machine. It's to give you energy right when you need it, fast and efficient. That's what the anaerobic system does. So anything that you need energy right away, think anaerobic. Aerobic gives you energy over a long period of time. It's a slower system. It takes much longer to start seeing results or to start getting your energy. So any slow activity, not really slow, but not as intense activity, think aerobic, such as running, biking, swimming. They're not as intense. You can keep them up for a longer period of time. So that's a very brief overview of how your body takes glucose and converts it to ATP. We'll go into more detail in other videos.